The most violent thing you can do to someone, without ever touching them, is absolutely nothing. Have you ever noticed that when you argue with someone and they scream at you, your natural instinct is to scream back? It feels like a reflex. It feels normal. But what happens when they scream and you just stare? You don't speak. You don't frown. You don't react. Suddenly, the dynamic in the room flips. They don't just feel angry anymore. They feel unstable. They feel powerless. And most terrifying of all, they feel invisible. Society teaches us that communication is the key to everything. But psychology tells us a darker, more primal truth. Silence is not empty. It is an answer. And usually, it is the loudest one in the room. Welcome to the psychology of ignoring people. Today, we are going to decode why silence causes physical pain in the brain, why it creates obsession, and how you can use it as a defensive weapon against manipulation. First, we need to understand the biology of the victim. Why does being ignored hurt so much? I'm not speaking metaphorically. I mean physical pain. There is a term for this in psychology, ostracism. To understand it, you have to look at human history. For thousands of years, humans relied on the tribe for survival. If you were yelled at, you were still part of the tribe. But if you were ignored, if you were shunned, it meant you were being left behind to die. To your ancestors, silence was a death sentence. Your brain hasn't forgotten this. Neuroscientists have used fMRI scans to watch the brain when a person is being socially rejected or ignored. They found that a specific region lights up, the anterior cingulate cortex. Here is the fascinating part. This is the exact same region of the brain that registers physical pain, like burning your hand or breaking a bone. So, when you ignore someone, you aren't just hurting their feelings. To their nervous system, you are essentially punching them in the gut. But there is a second layer to this. Silence doesn't just hurt, it creates obsession. Have you ever wondered why ghosting in modern dating is so psychologically damaging? It's due to a psychological principle called the Zeigarnik Effect. The human brain hates unfinished tasks. It craves closure. When someone breaks up with you by yelling, it hurts, but the story has an ending. But when someone simply disappears, when they ignore your text, the story remains unfinished. Your brain gets stuck in a loop, trying to solve the puzzle. What did I do wrong? Are they busy? Do they hate me? By giving no answer, you force the other person's brain to obsess over you, trying to close the loop. Silence turns you into a puzzle that they cannot solve. Now, let's flip the script. How do high-value individuals use this as a tool? In high-stakes negotiations, silence is a predator. Imagine you are in a meeting. You state your price. The other person hesitates. Most people get nervous. They start talking to fill the silence. They say, well, maybe we can negotiate, or, I know it's high, but... By speaking, they signal weakness. The powerful person uses what is called the pregnant pause. They make their statement, and then they stop. They become comfortable with the awkwardness. This silence creates immense psychological pressure. We are socially conditioned to fill quiet moments. Usually, the other person will start talking just to relieve their own anxiety, often revealing information or agreeing to terms they didn't want to accept. By saying nothing, you force them to negotiate against themselves. But what about defense? What about toxic people, narcissists, or drama magnets? These people feed on your emotional energy. If they insult you and you cry, they win. If you yell back, they win. To them, negative attention is still attention. The only way to defeat them is a technique psychologists call the gray rock method. You don't ignore them aggressively. You don't storm out of the room. Instead, you become as uninteresting as a gray rock. You give them zero emotional sustenance. One-word answers. No eye contact. Flat voice. Okay. Maybe. I see. You deny them the dopamine hit of a reaction. When the toy stops squeaking, the child eventually gets bored and stops playing with it. However, a final word of warning. There is a fine line between protecting yourself and being abusive. In a relationship, using silence to punish someone you love is called stonewalling. Dr. John Gottman, a famous relationship researcher, calls this one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, a top predictor of divorce. If you use silence to make your partner feel worthless, that isn't strength. That is emotional cruelty. Do not confuse power with abuse. In a world that is constantly screaming for your attention, silence is the ultimate luxury. It creates mystery. It commands respect. And sometimes, it says more than words ever could. So the next time someone tries to drag you into their chaos, Try doing absolutely nothing. And watch what happens.